My people, no be today history dey get leg for this our obodo Naija. You don hear how Olusegun Obasanjo and Ibrahim Babangida, two men wey sabi power play for dis country, don write say Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu no be the villain wey dem paint am to be. E be like say the story wey we sabi about the 1966 coup never complete. For years, dem don talk say Nzeogwu be the mastermind, say na Igbo agenda, say na tribal wahala, but Olusegun Obasanjo, wey be im close friend and fellow soldier, talk say Nzeogwu just wan purge corruption, say e no even plan make Igbo people take over. Babangida too talk say Nzeogwu no be tribalistic, say na patriotic soldier wey wan save Nigeria from bad leaders. But wait oh, if Nzeogwu no be the main wahala, who can use the coup gain power? How come the same people wey support am later turn against am? This matter deep, and e go make you reason say maybe we no dey hear the full story for our history book. Abeg, make you no just sit down look. Drop your thoughts for comment section below. How do you think, what did you think about this story? And also, you are going to hear a reaction from a Southeastern Senate, reacting to the IBB new book launch, when he said that the coup was not an Igbo coup. So you guys are going to watch the reaction. So make sure you watch this video till the end, like it so that YouTube will also recommend it to your other friends. Subscribe to this channel if you are new to this channel. So take a look at the video.
In the early hours of January 15th, 1966, a group of young Nigerian soldiers staged a coup that would change the course of the nation's history. At the forefront was Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu, a man whose ideals, ambitions, and actions remain a subject of debate to this day. Chukwuma Nzeogwu was born on February 26, 1937, in Kaduna, northern Nigeria, to Igbo parents from Opanam, present-day Delta State. His upbringing in a multicultural environment shaped his worldview and his deep sense of Nigeria's unity. Nzeogwu's military training took him to the prestigious Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, England, where he honed his skills and developed a strong sense of discipline and patriotism. By 1966, Nigeria was a young nation grappling with political instability, corruption, and ethnic tensions. Nzeogwu and his fellow officers saw themselves as saviors determined to cleanse the country of its ills. In his famous radio broadcast announcing the coup, Nzeogwu says our enemies are the political profiteers, the swindlers, the men in high and low places that seek bribes and demand 10%.
Our enemies are the political profiteers, the swindlers, the men in high and low places that seek bribes and demand 10%. Those that seek to keep the country divided permanently so that they can remain in office as ministers or VIPs at least. The tribalists, the nepotists, those that make the country look big for nothing before international circus. Those that have corrupted our society and put the Nigerian political calendar back by their words and deeds. Like good soldiers, we are not promising anything miraculous or spectacular. But what we do promise every law-abiding citizen is freedom from fear and all forms of oppression, freedom from general inefficiency, and freedom to live and strive in every field of human endeavor, both nationally and internationally. We promise you that you will no more be ashamed to say that you are a Nigerian. I leave you with a message of good wishes and ask for your support at all times, so that our land, watered by the Niger and Benue, between the sandy wastes and the Gulf of Guinea, washed in salt by the mighty Atlantic, shall not detract Nigeria from gaining sway in any great aspect of international endeavor. I wish you all good luck, and I hope you will cooperate with the fullest in this job, which we have set for ourselves, of establishing a prosperous nation and achieving solidarity.
The coup though initially successful in the north, ultimately failed to achieve its nationwide objectives. Key political figures, including Premier of the Northern Region, Ahmadu Bello, and Premier of the Western Region, Ladoke Akintola, were assassinated. The Prime Minister of Nigeria, Tafawa Balewa, was killed in the coup. Some have said that Nzeogwu's actions were driven by a desire for a united Nigeria, free from corruption and tribalism. However, his methods and the coup's fallout remain controversial. Some saw him as a hero who dared to challenge a corrupt system, while others viewed him as a traitor whose actions led to a chain of events that plunged Nigeria into a civil war. Following the coup, Nzeogwu was imprisoned but later released to fight on the side of Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War. His commitment to the Biafran cause, however, was short-lived. Did Nzeogwu fight for Biafra? Nzeogwu had his own mission. That is where referring to books comes in. If you look at this work of biographical history, Obasanjo tells the story of Nzeogwu. It is one of the classics on Nzeogwu. In fact, it is the most comprehensive work on Nzeogwu written by Obasanjo, an officer that knew him closely. It is not from this book that I intend to read on this edition of State Affairs. The book I want to read from is this book, The Nigerian Revolution and the Biafran War, The Aftermath, written by Alexander Madiebo. I want to read from this book. Reading is key to unlocking the mind's potential. It bridges the past, present, and future, empowering us with knowledge, igniting creativity, and fostering understanding. Every page turned is a step towards growth. So let's grow in the history of Kaduna Nzeogwu. Let's read from Madiebo's book. Who is Madiebo? Madiebo was the ground officer commanding of the Biafran army during the war. To state it clearly, after Ojukwu as the head of state of Biafra, the next powerful figure was General Alexander Madiebo. After the war and after returning from exile, he wrote this book. But I want to read from page 390 to make a point about Kaduna Nzeogwu. It is the view of Alexander Madiebo. He says, in one such operation around Ukpi Junction, Major Nzeogwu's party was ambushed by the army. Most of his men were either killed or seriously wounded. According to some reports, Nzeogwu was seriously wounded and died before he could get adequate medical attention. Other reports claimed that when he got to the rear and was recognized by some Nigerian soldiers, they decided to execute him for killing the Saudana of Sokoto. Madiebo continues, Nzeogwu's corpse was later taken to Kaduna for public display and burial. However, it is a fact that Major Nzeogwu was never a Biafran. Can you take note of that? Alexander Madiebo in this book says Nzeogwu was never a Biafran. He continues, he did not join the Biafran army or any military or paramilitary organization throughout his life in Biafra. This is the GOC of the Biafran army talking about Nzeogwu in his book. Madiebo says, rather, Nzeogwu merely used Biafra as a base to continue his fight against what he considered to be a continuation of the July 1966 coup against the federal military government of General Ironsi. He says, thus, the ultimate hero of Nigerian revolution and the Biafran war is Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu, for he was neither on the side of Ojuku's rebellion nor on the side of Gowon's coup. You want to read more of Madiebo's analysis of the Nigerian Revolution and the Biafran War? I recommend this book to you. Order your copy on udarabooks.com or through our WhatsApp numbers shown on the screen. It is the power of history. It is the power of reading. I am also recommending this book by Olusegun Obasanjo on Nzeogwu. It's entitled Nzeogwu. If you read this book, it explains the journey so far. Nzeogwu's death marked the end of a turbulent chapter in Nigerian history, but his legacy continues to spark debates about patriotism, military intervention, and national unity.
Ohaneze Ndigbo, when it comes to compensation, beyond the monetary compensation, what are you specifically asking for in terms of reparation, in terms of healing for the Igbo people, now that the fact that 1966 coup can no longer be termed as an Igbo coup? What are you looking for in terms of reparation and compensation?
Well, I will say that it was quite relieving that former President Babangida's book has one more time confirmed what we have always known to be the state of affairs with that coup. I have read so many books on that subject matter from the 1980s, you know, and there were so many books on the matter already, even those written by the major participants in the coup. I have read the book by Colonel then Major Adewale Ademoyega, which was mentioned in Babangida's book as one of the 5 majors that were the leaders of that coup, Why We Struck. That was his own book. There were other books written by other people who were involved in that coup. Someone like Colonel Emmanuel Bosi of blessed memory, Ben Boulier, then Aboyega himself. There was no way we would have felt better than coming from General Babangida, who was later military head of state and was an officer in the Nigerian army, though as a young officer, but having become head of state under military dispensation, it will be clear that he had access to classified information. So he was not just writing as a young military officer when the coup took place. He wrote from the point of deep knowledge from classified information in the military. So that his statement was very emphatic, and truly speaking, the coup was not an Igbo coup. It was a coup, like he posited, by young military revolutionaries who thought that they would make things better for Nigeria by removing the government at the time. And the primary objective was to release Bafemi Awolowo, who was in prison in Calabar. Even though they did not get to the point of releasing Awolowo from prison, events later showed that it was Ojukwu who released Awolowo from Calabar prison. So the coup itself was also not supported by Ojukwu himself. Having come to this realization that is should be incontrovertible at this time, what do we make of it? In terms of reparation and so on and so forth, my own is we should take advantage of this revelation and the clear statement made by General Babangida to begin the process of reconciliation and healing. The Igbos of Nigeria have been held in so much contempt with successive administrations in Nigeria, starting from Gowon, and were put on a very dark spot in the affairs of this country that to organize a coup that killed some important people in Nigeria. But truthfully and reassuringly, this book has exposed that the Igbos themselves crushed the coup. Major Obienu from Nnewi was credited to be one person who played a very pivotal role in crushing the coup. Ojukwu was a commander in Kano at the time of the coup. And I read and also I heard from him personally because, I worked with him for 5 years until his death. He was national leader of ABGA and I was national chairman of ABGA. So at various times I discussed these matters with him to get the truth of the matter. He had telephone exchange with Major Nzeogwu where he declined to support the coup. Ojukwu was an Igbo man and was somebody who played a major role going forward later in history. So I would like Nigerians to bury the hatchets and shift their mind from the narrative that the Igbos organize the coup for selfish reasons. The Igbos did not ask the officers to go and organize any coup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Ume,
So on the issue of reparation.
Yeah, he hasn't that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Answer reparation before I ask you.
Yeah, the question around reparation and what would
Okay, I should take the issue of
look like.
reparation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well, Othman Danfodio said that conscience is an open wound. Only the truth can heal it. So now that it is clear that Igbos did not organize any coup to kill anybody for selfish reasons, it follows that all the things the Igbos have been denied in Nigeria by the successive governments, starting from Gowon down to the present day even, that Igbos should be seen as Nigerians with the same rights and privileges that other Nigerians should enjoy in the affairs of government. The discrimination handed down to the Igbos because of this should now abate. It should end. Let everybody come to the table with equal rights.
Okay. Couple of things. I want to ask, are you following the way, and let me just establish again for the sake of posterity, there was no Igbo coup. It was just propaganda to hang all of this on the Igbos, and we know what happened then. Even before, Babangida didn't even need to write the book. Before, we had said there was nothing called an Igbo coup. It was just propaganda. And also, the Western media that portrayed that propaganda also, is there any, letter to be written to that Western, because that Western media still exists, that pushed that propaganda big time, and we know that, number one. So, number one, are you also saying that, are you joining the likes of Nzeogwu to talk about a 10 trillion reparation? I've heard 10 trillion, I've heard all sorts of figures. That's number one. Number two, do you think Gowon too should be able to write his own side of his story? Because he's 90 now, and he also needs to tell some side of that story. We've had conversations about Gowon saying, yes, they said in some fora, he had apologized to people. No, we've not had a definitive book from Gowon. Do you think Gowon should tell his own side of the story? And do you subscribe to the likes of some people that are saying over 10 trillion, I think it was Nzeogwu, and they're calling all sorts of amounts for this reparation? Those are the two questions, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, starting with Gowon, I think Gowon owes Nigerians a duty to write his own account of that war and the things that led to the war and the way the war was carried out and the way the war ended. Because when the war ended, he promised the Nigerian people reconciliation, restitution, and rehabilitation, particularly to the Igbo side of the nation. That he did not implement until he was overthrown in 1975. And these accounts that have come out, particularly from General Babangida, because these things are already available everywhere, preponderant stories written by the actual participants in the coup and the counter coup and the civil war. All these things are available. So he himself should stop playing the ostrich. He just like Babangida came out as an elder statesman at 80 now, he decided to speak the truth, including on matters of June 12. People should not return certain things unto death. Gowon was a principal person in the whole episode. He was the one that destroyed the regional arrangement in Nigeria and created the 12-state structure from where we had all these things. So he needs to come out and put his statements clearly. And because of the way he handled the war and the way he treated the Igbos, including the massacre of the Igbo people, he owes the Igbo people apology. Incidentally, he could not join these issues when people like General Ojukwu, people like him were alive. But still, his conscience requires that he must tell the truth. He must speak the truth before he leaves the stage. Yes, at 90, he cannot keep quiet and pretend over these things. A lot of books have been written, what he did and what he failed to do to ensure that that war was avoided. He was accused of so many breaches of agreement, both Aburi Accord and the rest of it. If he had kept his own side of the Aburi Accord, I believe Nigeria wouldn't have plunged into a civil war. So he didn't do these things. He needs to write a book.
Senator,
he needs to write a book
Senator
and
May.
tell his story and apologize. Yeah.
Senator May, this figure 10 trillion keeps ringing in my it keeps ringing in my head. Can you please articulate something and simplify it for me?
So,
What exactly are you asking for this 10 trillion for, if you are, and what do you intend to do with it? In very simple terms.
Thank you very much. I do not want to begin to talk about figures for reparation in terms of monetary compensation. I think what is important is that at this stage where we are, let's put behind those dark days in our history and go forward. They know what they denied the Igbos. A change in attitude of the present government towards reintegrating the Igbos fully into the Nigerian project and casting away that suspicion that Igbos organized a coup that made them to be removed from their scheme of things in Nigeria. If we put a stop to it, it begins the healing process. It's not something that you use money to quantify in terms of compensation. What we need is a change in attitude. Today is still morning time in the life of Nigeria. Let them begin to build the infrastructures infrastructure in Igbo land.
In everywhere in Nigeria.
Yes,
Senator, I agree with you. Let's put aside that money thing because it's so clear and yet very difficult to understand in many circumstances. Let's go to another thing. I think it is clear, it is very good for us to remember that whether somebody is Fulani, Igbo, or Ijo, I want Nigerians to remember it's an accidental thing. And I believe that it is limiting for us to be defined by something that is accidental. I'd rather it be known as a carpenter, a lover, or a singer than really that accidental thing that came to us. Now, the Igbo coup expression, which you seem to say is the origin of a lot of problem that we've had since after that coup, we can call it a Nigerian coup because the people who did it were all Nigerians, ultimately. But I think if we really want to move forward the way you say we should, and say, let us cast away that black thing, it will be important not to consider the rest of Nigerians as evil and say perhaps they make a mistake, perhaps they misunderstand. At least not those in power, the ones on the street. Those ones on the street that are calling it Igbo coup, rightly or wrongly, the reason why they call it Igbo coup, we should study it. Whether you agree with them or not, some of them say it is an Igbo coup because the people that were killed were not Igbo and the ones that were not killed were Igbo. Whether or not that was their intention, maybe they wanted to install Awolowo as head of state or prime minister. The reason why people are saying so is that the victims of the coup, not the counter coup, the victims of the coup itself were non-Igbos, while those who were their peers as Igbos did not suffer their fate. I think this is a historical thing, but I'd like you to comment on misunderstanding of history and perhaps exploitation of facts in histories for propaganda purposes. So if we want to black out, let's talk to Nigeria. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Like you had earlier said about the Western media,
yes,
how they have consistently spinned the stories as the coup being an Igbo coup. It's very unfortunate that even events in history have proven that the coup wasn't an Igbo coup, and the Western media have refused to let go. Even after Babangida's presentation of his book, upon this revelation and statement that the coup wasn't an Igbo coup, some people have started writing again from the Western media, trying to ask questions and posers to make it an Igbo coup. But the principal thing is that from the original intention of the coup plotters, the main man who was to be installed president of Nigeria, if the coup had succeeded, was eventually brought out from prison, from Calabar, by Ojukwu himself. So I think whatever people try to write and conjecture to be able to put a certain people in distrust in the minds of Nigerians should cease. Because I don't think going with that storyline, and if you look at the counter coup itself, the Igbos have paid very huge price for the counter coup. For the fact that the executioners of the coup, some of them failed in their assignments, will not make it a deliberate thing to be heaped on the Igbo people. There are people who can be in that assignment, and some of them can be lousy. They will not be able to implement assignments given to them. Some did it purposefully, successfully, without doing it for the, with any intention to make one side suffer for it more, other than to achieve their purpose, to change government and bring up Obafemi Awolowo to power. So we have to see it at that. Continuing to try to expose the Igbos to national distrust is very wrong. Major Adewale Adeboyege and Captain Adeleke and Ganiu, all of them mentioned in that book, you know where they come from. They are not Igbo people. They were in the plot and the execution of the coup. So because some of them couldn't see their own assignments through, could not be said to be a plan for a coup directed at some people against the other. There were so many things that played out along the line. There was counter coup. Agui Ironsi, who was the highest military officer that assumed the authority of power at that time, the way he proceeded, he fought for the unity of Nigeria. He didn't want Nigeria to be dismembered, but he paid dearly with his own life. He was killed. And at that time, the spirit of brotherhood was very strong. Colonel Fajui, who was playing host to him as the military governor of the Western region, chose to die with him. He was killed together with General Ironsi. So all these things, particularly what politicians started doing, and some manipulators along the line, they were the people that sowed the seed of discord that has become so bitter. People want to use that to capitalize on their political interests and gains. I don't see what you should do.
Senator. People want to
who was released
capitalize
from
on
prison.
things.
Yes. I'm coming.
Senator Ume,
Yes, the captain of
Senator
who
Ume.
was released from prison.
Yes, just as you wrap up your
became vice
thoughts.
chairman of Military Council of Gowon.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Of course, this is a very robust conversation that must be had and cannot be finished in one session alone. So we'll definitely continue just expounding on this and just discussing it and breaking it down. But thank you for your time with us today, and hopefully have you again very